Hello, everyone. Thanks for everyone who's joining. This is my first time doing a webinar on Google Hangouts Live, so feel free to put any thoughts in the live chat. I'll be checking that out and looking forward to tailoring today's presentation for you. So just to get things started, so first and foremost, my name is Pete Sena. I am a creative technologist and digital marketer. Really excited today to share some of the techniques that we've been using as an organization to really start leveraging design thinking and more progressive agile ways of working to really amplify how we do content inside of our organization. So just to get started, my company is called Digital Surgeons. We are a technology-enabled organization. We do a lot of design and creative technology, and we work with a number of different brands and audiences across the globe. Essentially, the one thing that we think is a little bit different about us is that we believe that we design demand. So whether it's a startup that's just getting started and needs a minimum viable product or a brand, or a Fortune 50 organization that's looking to help deal with user retention issues or user acquisition issues, we work really across the gamut. So there's not a particular shape or size client that is consistent with us. One of the things that all of our clients will come to us for is some version of design, marketing, and technology. And really at the crux, Digital Surgeons explores and invents new ways for brands to reach, connect, and build relationships with their customers, specifically in digital channels. So while it's not uncommon for us to do a video spot for a TV commercial or a billboard or other forms of traditional marketing, where we feel our sweet spot really is in digital design, user experience, and marketing. So today, one of the things that I wanted to talk a lot about with you guys when I was asked to do this webinar is really, how do we start to all have a culture of content? So I think at this point, everyone that's on the line here knows that content matters, right? It's, of course, the one thing that is really affecting everything, all the experiences that we have today, the experiences as both consumers and marketings, they're really affecting. And we're all great at creating content for our clients, right? So whether you're a solopreneur or running a large organization that has multiple marketers, I would like to think that everyone that's on this HubSpot webinar today, the 64 of you here and growing, we're all great at creating content for our clients. But I think we all would agree that most of us, and I'm not saying all of us, but most of us really suck at creating it for ourselves. So I'm not going to drop terrible puns and cliches. At least I'm going to try to only put those on the slides and not actually say those today. But in all seriousness, one of the things that we came across a little over a year ago was I was in a meeting with a client, pretty large client, and the client was complimenting us. They had been working with them for a little over 3 years. And one of the things that they said to us was, couldn't help but notice that you guys don't publish content as much as we publish content, and you guys are doing such a great job for us. I'd love to get more of your point of view. So it was at that point that we started dabbling with our own content, and one of the things that we first were plagued with was, how do we do this? We have so many designers, technologists, user experience folks, and how do we get all that thought leadership to really come forward? We're always busy with client issues. We're always busy really supporting our customers, because most of us on this call today are service-based businesses or in service of a bigger goal or business of ourselves. So one of the things we started doing is really thinking about what's the one way that we could really tackle the content problem that we have inside of our organization. And one of the things that we do a lot with a lot of our customers is design thinking. So I'd love to just, maybe if you guys could go into the chat, just a show of kind of emojis or quick comments, just who's familiar with design thinking or not familiar with design thinking, just so I can get a little bit of audience feedback. I've got a little bit of a delay here on the line, so forgive me if it's taking just a second for it to come through on the live chat. Oh, fantastic, Marnie. James, thanks so much for sharing that. So I'm going to just introduce design thinking in just a second. So one of the things that I'm going to hopefully at the end of this call today help you guys do is really establish an internal culture of content. And being able to do so is going to really help us kind of drive 3 core buckets. First and foremost, it's driving awareness. So I think at this point, we all know great content differentiates your agency and it attracts the attention of potential partners and talent in the market. Being able to tackle that will then allow you to really increase revenue, which was effectively going to help drive your business development efforts. And I think we all know that valuable content is going to arm your business development team, your sales teams with the needed collateral, with the needed validation to really boost and drive the effectiveness of each sales touch point. And HubSpot has really built an entire industry on it. You know, if we think about the term inbound marketing, which HubSpot literally created the category around, you know, they rank just about for anything that you would search for on the internet. If you're looking for things on content strategy or content marketing or inbound marketing or SEO, if you're doing your research, you're not going to not come across HubSpot. And that does a great job for HubSpot to make them really an authentic and valuable partner to be able to trust using their platform and using them as an expert in that area. So again, being able to position your business to increase revenue is going to be really important. And then it also helps level up teams. So we've got people of all different experience levels, I think, in any organization, and being able to help them get involved with content and establish point of views will help them both codify and learn the things that they're doing on a daily basis. It's really going to help people progress their teams. So one of the things that I'm hoping to really put you guys out on the line to sort of try today, and the first thing I would say is if anybody's listening in on this webinar, hopefully you're not on your cell phone texting or snapping or on Instagram. Hopefully I still got your attention, and I appreciate the attention for that. What I'd ask is just if everybody could just maybe grab a piece of paper or a pen or just open up a sort of text edit file on your computer. We're going to do a little exercise together in a couple minutes. I just want to make sure that you have either something to write with or something to type with that's not going to be distracting. But today what we're going to do is we're going to really change the way we work. So let me first introduce design thinking, since I know some of the folks on the call today are experts in design thinking, and some of the folks here are not as aware of it. So I always like to sort of shoot in the middle, because if I go too deep, I might miss some folks. If I go too shallow, the experts in the room might sort of laugh me off the stage here. So let me just first dive into the benefits of design thinking. So first and foremost, design thinking is much bigger than just content. It's much bigger than the topic today. It's really a way of thinking, doing, and being. And what design thinking does is it allows you to amplify the creativity and the creative output and product and outcomes that your organization delivers. And then it also helps to eliminate the disconnect between managers and teams. I think we all know all too well, maybe some of us are practitioners, or some of us might be managers, and even some of us might be both. I think what design thinking helps us do is sort of flatten out the room and really allows people to collaborate and open up that vulnerability that's going to lead to better thinking and better work and more trust on teams. And what it allows us to do is really focus on outcomes over outputs, and outcomes like growing your business or generating leads or being able to really enhance the experience that you have with your prospects and your customers. So first question, what the heck is this design thinking stuff? If you ask 100 people who are really into design thinking what the definition of design thinking is, you're going to get 101 different answers. So one of the things that I would say, just to really give it a definition that I think you can explain to anyone, irrespective of your background, is I think design thinking is a process for solving complex problems through observation and iteration. So just another quick audience question. Who's familiar with Lean Startup or the business model canvas, or some of the iterative ways of working in the startup methodology? And just to be mindful, I've got a little bit of a delay between talking with you and what's coming up on my screen, so forgive me if it's a little awkward on your end. So I'll first dive into the 5 key principles around design thinking. If you Google any design thinking framework, there's going to be many different ways for you to go and tackle that. But really, I'd like to break it down into 5 core principles. One, it's all about curiosity. We really have to understand the problem that we're trying to solve, really frame that problem. And that really starts by diving into empathy, and empathy for who you're trying to reach, what are their needs and their wants, what are the way that they're looking at the world, which is not the way that we're looking at the world. You know, as many of us on the call today are agencies or sort of selling our services to others, I think it's important to note that we are the experts. And in many cases, people are coming to us for one of 2 reasons. One, they don't have the expertise that we have, or second, they might just not have the time to do that. And those that don't have the time but might have the expertise might approach the way that we work a little bit different than you. And what I like about design thinking is it really lets us take a human-centered approach to how we solve problems. Critical thinking, and I stop on this for just a second because I think critical thinking is something that, with the wealth of content that's out there on the internet, we can basically Google and learn anything in this day and age. And because of that, I think we have a lot of people who are getting really lazy with the way that they're thinking. So I think critical thinking is a really key component to design thinking in terms of how you approach problem solving. Collaboration is a extremely critical thing. Many of you might work at large organizations that are maybe they're matrixed, so you have different departments that don't often collaborate or work well together. Maybe getting together in a room is something that is typically stale meetings or meetings about meetings in some cases. So I think that collaboration is a really key component to design thinking. One of the first things that you'll see or think about with design thinking is you'll see a bunch of people around a whiteboard or Post-it notes. You know, there's a lot of jokes around what goes into that, and hopefully today I'm going to demystify some of those things for you. And then really commitment. That is a very, very key principle to design thinking. You know, some of the greatest inventions of our time don't happen on the first try. So I think we have to continue to go and to put things out there. When you're not going to walk away from this call today and be able to instantly put content in play for your organization. It's going to take time. But if you stick with me in this webinar, I can pretty much guarantee that I can help you avoid the 1,000+ failures that we've had over the past few years in terms of how we approach content. So we believe that great content lies at the intersection of trend, pain point, and point of view. And by point of view, what I mean is, as experts, you have a very specific and unique point of view that being able to establish that is going to make you appear as the expert and then also as a thought leader and a unique point of view. Being able to intersect that with trend and things that are happening right now is going to enable you to really capture search volume, which is a really big component of inbound search. And then really pain point, again, understanding what is the audience's pain point? What are they trying to learn? What business problem do they have? And how can your product, service, or experience help solve that? So now that we know what that sort of intersection looks like, let's sort of get into, just at a high level, what are the 4 big steps for bringing that to life? So whether we're doing a branding project, a content strategy project, or a full-blown brand reimagination from the ground up, we break all of our projects down into these 4 core steps. The first is extract, the second is explore, the third is prototype and test, and then the fourth is go to market. And then, like any great design thinking process or lean startup process, it's all about test and learn. It's all about moving forward and iterating on the learnings that we have. Nothing we put out in the market is ever going to be perfect. And one of the people who inspires me quite a bit is a guy by the name of Gary Vaynerchuk, who you guys might be familiar with. Gary is a really, really interesting personality. And if you go back and you look at some of his early stage podcasts or videos, they're very, very, very raw. And he would probably say in a lot of his more recent things that he was embarrassed of some of the first things he put out. And I sort of feel like if we're not embarrassed with the first things we put out, looking back a year later, we're not progressing. So I would just want to challenge all of us to really start by doing. And this process we're going to talk about today is going to help by doing that. So in Extract, I think the first thing we need to do with how we're thinking about content strategy and how we can apply some of these new ways of thinking is really frame the problem. So one of the things that we do a lot here, because we do a lot of interaction design and development, is we take a lot of the principles of Agile. So in Agile, there's this thing called user stories. And for those that might not be familiar with it, user stories are a way of defining something that needs to be designed, built, or written. So I took this concept of user stories and we started testing this with our internal content, and it worked really, really well. So I'm going to walk you guys through that. So as an audience or user type, I need a particular feature or component so that I can complete what task. And essentially what we've done here is we've broken this down into a couple of different conversion goals, right? So as a marketing manager, I need to learn about SEO so that I can get more traffic and leads, right? So being able to sort of take this blank worksheet here, and we do this a lot in we call them content salons with our team, where we'll get together a team of different experts, sometimes also with our clients, and we'll work through what are their overall goals, and then we'll sort of reverse engineer, starting with what the outcome is, what are all the steps incrementally to get there. So in this particular fictitious example. What's the primary goal? Okay, we have a landing page or a piece of content or blog article. We really want someone to sign up. So we want them to sign up on our sign up form. So as a marketing manager, this is the audience that we're trying to target, right? It's a marketing manager at another type of business, and we're trying to sell them some type of content marketing or content strategy related deliverables, which I know many of you are. So what they need is they essentially, to fulfill that need to learn about SEO, they're out there in the market, they're searching for it. What they need is a deeper report or knowledge or some type of information on that topic. And how we're going to deliver that to them, or how we're going to complete that task, is by giving them perhaps an article, a video, an infographic, or another form of content. And then we can go down, we can actually map out what the different conversion goals are that they have. So maybe we want them to just share my page, or putting it out to their audience. So in that case, I think the biggest rule that I like to think about is just human nature is give to get. Whenever you're creating any type of content to pull people in, making sure that the thing that we're putting out there is essentially going to fulfill the things that they have. So let me actually dive into that a little bit more specifics. So some of you, I'm guessing many of you are probably either using personas, creating personas, or are on this call today to hopefully learn a little bit more about that. So one of the tools, if you're not an expert in personas, when you're just getting started, HubSpot has an amazing number of tools for persona development. They've got some great templates on their site and their tool. And they even made a website called Make My Persona, where you can go and you can actually fill in a bunch of answers to prompts and questions that they have. And from there, it'll help you spit out some personas. Once you have those personas, what you can really do is you can then focus on how do you apply those personas, right? And going back just for a moment, once you have the personas, you can start to figure out what their user stories are, right? So as a type of person or type of persona, I need a particular thing that I'm trying to solve. So maybe they need a content marketing agency. Maybe they need a writer or a designer or a UX person. Maybe they need all those things. So by being able to really understand and get inside the head of your customer, that's really where this design thinking stuff comes into play. It's really human-centered. It's not looking at the world through your eyes and through your expertise, but looking at the world through their eyes and expertise. So in this case here, one of the things that we do a lot of is not just digital personas, which is a little bit of guesswork and sometimes survey-based. We also really, really love to do user interviews. So a really big thing that I would suggest doing when you're developing content for your clients or your prospects is take some of your best clients and interview them. Understand how they found you, what they love about you, what you can do better. And I like to do something called the 5-act interview. And here on the screen is actually a photo that was taken right out of a YouTube video from Google Ventures. And the URL is here on the bottom right of the page, gv.com/sprint. And in this, if you conduct a 5-act interview, you can do these in person. And if in person isn't possible because of logistics, or if you're a remote company, you can also do this over a Google Hangout, like we're talking to you right now. You can do it over GoToMeeting or Uber Conference. There's a wealth of things that you can use that are either free tools or low cost on a regular basis. If you don't have necessarily access to being able to conduct these user interviews, I would definitely recommend also looking into a service like user testing or UserBrain. These services have really great customer service people on their end, and they'll help you with how to recruit the right users that you need, what questions you can ask them, and you can get such amazing information. Sometimes just interviewing 3 to 5 people can tell you everything and more that you would normally get from your own version of desk research or using these persona tools that I mentioned earlier. So I cannot stress the importance of diving in and really talking to people and understanding how they view and see the world. The amount of learnings that we've had just by having 15-minute conversations with some of our best and worst customers, and by worst I mean people that we used to work with but we're not working with anymore. Maybe they've moved away from you to go with another partner. It's super important to understand why. And if you don't know your audience, how can you ever, with even the best of ways to create content internally, ever be able to reach them? So knowing the audience is super key. So once you've identified who those personas are, there's a number of different questions. And again, I'm happy to answer questions at the end of this webinar. But really, the 4 key things you really need to dive into, like any great journalist, which I am not, is first, who are you targeting, right? We've established that in the personas. What are their interests and needs? You know, what are their unspoken needs that they're searching for? And we can get a big clue on this if we tap into some of the different trend softwares and programs, which I'm going to talk to you in just a few moments. And then why should they care, right? So if you're writing about SEO, yeah, so are 5,000 other websites. You know, why should they care about the way you're thinking about SEO? And that's really where remember that Venn diagram from a couple slides ago? That's really where your point of view, their pain point, and the trend that you're really sort of resonating around is super important. And then really closing it with, how are you going to solve their problem? How are you going to demonstrate that you as a solo practitioner or a large business has a solution that's differentiated? You know, what is your competitive advantage? These are all things that you really need to dig into for this process to really work for you. The next thing we like to do, again, remembering that we're all like the shoemaker, right? So we don't have time to create content because maybe we're a small team, maybe we're spread thin, but most importantly, we're service businesses, right? So we're always focused on our clients. So the thing that we like to do, once we know who we're talking to, once we know the problems we're trying to solve, is go inside your company, and maybe you are the expert, but go inside your company and find those experts. One of the things that I've noticed when working with teams here is a lot of times it's really, really difficult to be in the flow of the meeting, be in the flow of the interview with your team to get that expertise out of their head. Because in a lot of cases, you know, we've done things like, you know, sent out company-wide Slack messages or emails asking people to really submit content or submit content ideas. And it almost always falls by the wayside. There's always almost something that's more important. So by finding an expert in a particular topic, you can have your writers or people who are creating content extract the subject matter expertise out of that person's head and doing it in using a tool like Rev. So on the screen here on this iPhone here, you have a tool called Rev. And what Rev is basically it's a recording tool, no different than your voice memo app on your Google or Apple phone. And then what I like about Rev is for $1 a minute, you can submit this for transcription. And what's nice about that is if you're talking to someone for 30 minutes, then you send off that file for transcription, you'll get back a Word document that has all those things. Now, some of you might be saying, that sounds awesome. Some of you might be saying, well, I can't afford to spend $1 a minute on transcription. I'm a startup and I have to keep my costs low. No problem. You can try using software like the Dragon. Nuance makes a software suite for doing basically talking to the computer and typing. You can use the feature inside of Google Docs for transcription. But in my opinion, those things tend to not work as well. Technology has certainly come a long way, right? We all know that Siri and Alexa have gotten things a lot better now than they used to. But what I like about this Rev service is you've got real people typing and transcribing it as opposed to just trying to do it with machines. And what I found is the accuracy and the quality of the content has been significantly higher. So I really, really like to suggest doing this because what this has allowed us to do is rapidly get information out of subject matter experts' heads and then go and roll that out. And I think really at $1 a minute, hopefully many of us would think that this is a pretty inexpensive thing. And obviously, Ryan, thanks so much for saying that. I couldn't agree more. I mean, we could really realize the value of your own time and how much you can save by doing it. So the next really stage here is really diving in and exploring that. So now we've got all this, we've got our users, we've got our content. Now how do we go and create some ideas? So what I'm about to take you guys through is a couple of exercises that will really allow us to co-create and generate a lot of ideas very, very quickly, and then how you can go and rank those. So I'm a huge fan of this book, Game Storming. When I first read it years ago, it really, really changed the way that we work as a company. And there's just some brilliant and amazing and applicable exercises in this book. It's literally like a playbook that you can just very simply enact in your organization as soon as tomorrow. But no need, if you don't want to go out and read the book, that's fine, because I'm going to give you sort of some shortcuts that you can immediately take forward today. And as I mentioned, one of the reasons why I had you guys open up a text doc or grab a pen is that we're actually going to do an exercise together right now. And I really appreciate you guys helping me participate. It's much easier being in front of you guys and not knowing where you're at, what you look like, if you're smiling or throwing things at me is hard over this webinar. So thanks again. So one of the things that we're going to do today is something I came up with called the 50-50 experiment. So at one point, I think we've all found ourselves time crunched, running to a meeting. We're a little underprepared and we have a lot to do. And one time I was actually on a train, and I had to get things done really quick for my team back at the office while I was on my way to a meeting. So what I did is I just basically really quick came up with a way to sort of growth hack and generate a lot of ideas really, really fast. And I wrote an article about that on HubSpot. And you can get to that from the bit.ly link here on the page. In that, what I basically did is sort of walk through what works for me and how I was able to really generate a lot of ideas much faster just by going over and not thinking about quality of ideas, but really focusing on quantity first and then quality later. And I'll speak to that in just a moment because I can't stress enough. Quality is the most important thing. But if you focus too much on that in the first step, you're not going to get to that. So we're going to walk through that together. So I mentioned earlier trends and pain points. Two tools that we use all the time at Digital Surgeons for uncovering trends and questions. We use a number of different tools and subscriptions that we pay for, but I like these because these are, Google Trends is really free and BuzzSumo is extremely inexpensive. So hopefully some of you guys are familiar with both these tools. Google Trends is pretty self-explanatory. You can hop on the website. They've got some great articles where you can see research trends that they're posting, search queries, how a keyword or phrases are growing over time, what areas of region or interest. So we work with a lot of global clients, so being able to understand how specific things are trending in a particular region is also very helpful. And Google Trends provides a wealth of data for free, and their Insights newsletter is an amazing newsletter for just staying on top of human behavior, and I'd highly recommend checking that out if you're not familiar with it. So the tool BuzzSumo, in my opinion, that's kind of the secret sauce. What I love about BuzzSumo, the purpose of today's meeting, right, is how do we get everyone on this call creating content faster, creating better content, and getting that content as a first thing to do in the organization and not a last thing to do. So what I like about BuzzSumo is it's a great tool for aggregating what people are talking about on the internet on a particular keyword or topic. So perhaps you can select a keyword or topic that has to do with your business, or in some cases, you can just see what's trending. You know, we've all seen how when something was happening in the media, whether it's a Donald Trump meme or whatever it is, I mean, it allows people in some cases to create some really interesting takes on content. So, you know, the Donald Trump way of doing SEO, obviously that's going to be, you know, it's a little clickbaity in some cases, but for many of us that are trying to get out there and just get noticed, what I like about using BuzzSumo is you can see what the most popular sites are that are sharing content. You can see the headlines they're using. And what that allows us to do is understand how things are being shared or sent. And then also from there, you can kind of find that white space, right? So I generally don't recommend trying to do everything that everybody else is doing. What I like to recommend doing is if there's something that is a little underrepresented on the internet or a topic that you feel there's an audience for to speak to, what I like about BuzzSumo is it can help sort of validate that. It's a really easy tool. They've got some great help docs and videos. So you can probably teach yourself it in about 10 minutes. And it's also got some really helpful videos to teach you on that as well. And BuzzSumo, again, you can use that as you know, a one-person freelance business all the way up to, you know, some of our Fortune 50 clients we've actually got using BuzzSumo in their large content organizations. We have one of our clients has like a 40-person content team. And we got them using BuzzSumo and built them a couple of other custom things that they use for sourcing content. So these are tools that work at any shape, size, and scale of your business. So let's try one together. So one of the things I'm going to have everyone do, again, just get that pen and pad ready if you have it in front of you. If you don't have a pen or a pad, just open up a text file, a Google Doc, or a Word doc on your computer. So I'm just going to give everybody just a quick minute to do that. And we're going to go ahead and test that out together. So what I want everyone to do here is we're going to just do a quick design thinking exercise where we do some rapid idea generation. So what I'd like everyone to do is we've got 3 columns here. So remembering that Venn diagram. So first and foremost, we've got trends on the left here. We've got a list of all these different trends. And these are pulled from a lot of different trend reports, from venture capital and technology down to marketing and startups. A lot of really big trends you see here. And many of these are all over the internet, everything from the New York Times down to a small blog that we might read. The middle column here, we've got pain points and just a list of pain points. And then on the right, we've got your point of view. So what we're going to basically have you guys do is pick one item from every column, quickly jot that down, And once you've selected one thing from every column, what I want you to do is I want you to establish what your point of view is or what your content is. So as an example, and don't do this one because we're going to do it together, but how can what your product or service is, how can you talk about the trends in augmented reality, how customers are being less loyal to brands, and what do you believe is the future? So if you have a service that is all around creating video teaser content really fast. So how can you talk about the intersection of these three things and establish a new type of article? And one of the things I can't stress enough is I did trends, pain points, and point of view here just to make it easy for you guys to just pick one from every list. But in a lot of cases, what we do is once you know your audience and your personas, you can make your own list of trends, your own list of pain points, and your own list of point of views. So as an example, I don't know if any of you guys are working with any B2B customers, but I recently was mentoring someone who does content strategy and marketing for durable goods manufacturers. And one of the things that they saw was a big trend was appliances are now breaking much sooner, so that they're not making them as durable as they used to be, 10, 15 years ago. So a big pain point that their customers have is essentially that they're having to replace these products all the time. And what this particular person I was mentoring was trying to solve was they were trying to basically market a repair service company for appliances for local companies. So by them being able to understand that trend of machines breaking early and people sort of Googling things about it, the pain point that these things were breaking down, their point of view in this case, their unique competitive advantage was that they were able to add for the client they were writing for, which many of us are writing for clients, they were able to sort of combine those things together and create some really valuable content. So now let's just take a quick minute or two, have you guys pick one thing from each column or create your own if it doesn't work. And just by sort of combining these different things, almost like Mad Libs, if you will, I'd like if I can just get one volunteer maybe to just give me a good example of some content that you're going to write about, and then just pop it in the live chat. Awesome. Leanne, thanks so much for putting that. It's definitely the scariest feeling ever, just staring at the screen waiting for something to pop up. So, and Studio 20, thanks again for that. So, perfect. So let's dive right into that. So, voice interface and how to structure your content for voice. So, Leanne or Studio 20, can you tell me a little bit about the type of business or service that you offer to your customers, just so I could maybe sort of connect those dots for you? Or with you, rather? Awesome, Leanne. Thanks so much for that. So you do B2B inbound and content marketing. Is there a particular type of customer that you're targeting right now that you'd like to be able to reach? And while I'm waiting for Leanne to go ahead and answer that, I'm going to just jump into Studio 20's remark here about being a digital marketing agency. So Studio 20, one of I'm really glad to hear that you said that they're hesitant to jump to digital. So one of the things that you clearly have here is you've got a persona that is looking to get more educated about the value of digital. So the power there is there's so many rich data and facts out there that you can find about why digital marketing and digital content is really a powerful thing. So one of the things that you might do, Studio 20, is using some of those different columns, basically generate a list of different stats or value points and pain points that not switching to digital. So maybe you start generating a bunch of content around companies that didn't go digital. For example, maybe you talk about Blockbuster versus Netflix and explain how the advent of digital marketing and digital experiences really shifts that. And then you can have a very unique point of view on how, as a TV company, with people experiencing TV content much differently now and everything going mobile first and multi-screening, these are the ways that you can sort of quickly combine different things together to really bring that to bear. And then coming back to Leanne, as a B2B and content marketing company and as a technology company, maybe you're marketing a product or service. So understanding how does that product or service save someone time? What are some of the pain points that they particularly have? So I'll use the example of HubSpot just because I'm on a HubSpot webinar. So many people will sign up for HubSpot because it allows for a complete marketing suite for marketing automation. So we all want to know more about our customers. HubSpot's got the CRM features. We all want to be able to market and send content to them. They've got all the content submission features to be able to do that. And then we also want to make sure that we have an all-in-one tool to do everything. So HubSpot can very quickly take two angles in their content. One is they can educate people on content marketing, which they do an amazing job at. And two, they can show how by using their tool, you can bring all the tools together. So one of the examples here, just going back, one of the pain points that someone might have in the middle is that they're sick and tired of using multiple tools to be able to accomplish something. A big trend that we have is people are looking for convenience. People are looking for consolidation. They want an all-in-one experience, right? They want that one-click Amazon type of experience. And then on the right here, what is your point of view to do that, right? So if I was trying to sell HubSpot, which I'm not doing, but if I was trying to do that, I would try to link together each of these columns to generate a series of new ideas. So typically what that'll look like for us is when we're getting together with a couple people, sometimes we do content brainstorming sessions and it's one or two people, sometimes we do it 4 or 5. What I like to do if you have a different sales team and marketing team is once a month, just have get together for either a brown bag lunch or have lunch catered in if you have the means to do so, and just get together and with Post-it notes and Sharpie markers, put up on the wall as a prompt those 3 columns, and then have people just generate a bunch of different ideas, and then really understand who in your organization is the biggest expert on those contents. So once you're generating a bunch of different ideas, you might be asking the question, well, that's great, Pete, but then how do I know what things to do? And how do I select the ideas that I have? I've got more ideas than I have time to execute. Sound like a problem that you guys might have? So this is a technique. I'm going to show you a modified version of this. It's a little bit easier to use for content, but I'm going to talk a little bit about this thing which we use a lot in technology called the feasibility matrix. So a feasibility matrix, sort of, textbook, it's on the x-axis, you've got feasibility. On the y-axis, you've got importance. And what that allows you to do, if you're coming up with, say, a series of features for your product or your service, you can sort of rank them in hierarchy. And we do this a lot with understanding what features should make it into a minimum viable product or what things we might want to launch. And really what I like about this type of a chart is it understands very quickly, helps us as a team understand what are the things that we must do, things that we could do, and the things that are ultimately going to just waste our time. So this is a great technique for being able to do feasibility, but you might be asking, as a content marketer, how is that going to help you create content? I asked myself the exact same question when I first thought of this. We came up with something that is a little bit easier to use and people of all different experience levels and all different departments can use. So what we use a time and business impact grid. So what you can basically do either on a whiteboard or on a piece of sticky paper, or literally you could just put it on a small piece of paper if you want. We tend to do these on large whiteboards where we'll draw a sort of quick box like you see here on the screen. And what we do is we'll have people selecting from each of those columns, the trend, the pain point, and the point of view. And then sometimes people use that as a prompt. And then what they'll then do is they'll come up with a bunch of different ideas. So the first thing we do is we'll spend, sometimes it's as little as 5 minutes just generating ideas. And then everyone's sort of in a frenzy writing down Post-it notes. And then the next thing that we do is we ask everyone to plot what they think it's going to take in terms of time or cost, and then what impact ultimately they think it'll have to the business. So something that might be really, really high impact, but might be expensive or take a lot of time. One of the things that we're really, really big on with a lot of our customers is this notion of crawl, walk, and run. So how do you start making changes today? So as a small business or maybe a big business, you're trying to get better at launching content and marketing for yourselves. If not, you probably wouldn't be on this webinar today. You've got a million other things that you'd rather do. So really, in a case like this, you can quickly generate ideas and see what are things that are going to be able to really quickly solve for a piece of content that you have. So in some cases, I mentioned the example of the person that I was mentoring. They were able to come up with something as simple as a very, very easy how-to blog article that they then went and sent around to all their customers. And then what they did was they literally just sent an email to a bunch of their customers or prospects that outlined exactly how they had a solution that directly spoke to a pain point that that particular persona had. And ultimately, long term, it led to a lot of lead generation for them, and really sort of kicked off a culture of content that they have been now doing. So on a monthly basis, I think they're launching 5 or 6 pieces of blog content. And I think the average time that they spend creating that blog is around 2 to 3 hours per blog content. So not too bad if you think about the time it takes on a monthly basis. This is the kind of thing that people could, inside your organization, really get behind and get passionate about, that they understand how it's going to help impact their job or your business overall. So, a big part of design thinking, like I talked about today, again, design thinking being about how to be human-centered with the way that you're thinking, how to rapidly generate ideas, and then how to have different techniques to sort of narrow down those ideas and then test those ideas. So for those of you that are a little leery to just put content out there in the wild, one of the things that you can definitely do is you can prototype or you can test it with customers. The thing that I've done a lot in the past and had a lot of success with is when I'm writing a piece of content, I'll actually contact some of my best customers and I'll just interview them or I'll ask them questions. And what I like about that is it lets me feature them, and then they're going to be much more likely to share something because they're featured in it. Anytime you can give someone increased publicity or let them demonstrate themselves as a thought leader, they're really going to sort of get behind it. So sort of taking a step back for a second, in terms of prototyping, putting content out in the wild, I think today we talked a lot about how to generate ideas for content, how to know how to generate ideas for the people that we're trying to present to. And then we just got into sort of selecting the ideas that we're creating. So you might be saying, okay, great, Pete, I've got a couple of pieces of content. I can sort of buy into this way of generating ideas. But now, what are some quick ways that I can go and actually execute that? So that's a really good question, and it's one that we sort of struggled with initially when we were doing this ourselves a little over a year ago. What we did is we really worked together to understand what are the 5 common things that happen on every content project, whether it's something as simple as like posting to social media or something as elaborate as a campaign that has social media posts, blog articles, infographics, and then email marketing that's all connected together. And one of the things that we realized is there's really 5 steps to doing that, right? It's planning what the content is, when you're going to publish it. It's producing or making that content. We talked about some ways today to be able to bring that to life, right? How you can tap into those subject matter experts inside your organization or inside your clients' organizations. 3, it's how to go about coordinating that content. So figuring out who's responsible for what. We use a lot of different tools for doing that. We use tools like, in some cases, Trello or Slack or Basecamp. I'm going to give you some specific examples of some tools in just a minute that I think you can start using today that range from free and simple tools to enterprise tools that we're using for a lot of our customers. And then once you put that content out, how do you go about promoting it? So I think getting into the topic of paid media is probably a little too ambitious for today's presentation. I know we've only got about 15 minutes left, and I want to get to Q&A. And then last is sort of how do you optimize around those learnings? What we realized when we first started doing this is we generated ideas really quickly. It took a long time to go and create that content. And that's where we started using Rev to really get those transcriptions and then use that as a really strong base for, at that point, we were doing most of the content creation in the interviews, and then it was the edits and the tweaks that made it a little bit harder to bring to bear. So that's really sort of the 5 steps if I had to kind of simplify it. And then in terms of publishing or putting that content out in the market, syndicating that, having some tools to understand when you're publishing. So even if you're publishing more than 1 article a month, so 2 versus 200, one of the things that I like to think a lot about is what are some tools to sort of help keep you honest? Certainly, you can use Google Docs, you can use Microsoft Word or Excel tools that you have on your computer already. I like these tools because they're web-based tools. We have a pretty large team, so we're collaborating quite a bit, both with our customers and internally. So these are sort of 3 tools, I think, sort of ranging from small, medium, large when it comes to cost, that I would recommend. So CoSchedule, you've got screenshots here of each of them. CoSchedule is a great tool. It's cloud-based for being able to sort of easily drag, drop, plan, and assign to-dos. HubSpot, obviously, again, I feel like HubSpot's been a really, really, really powerful tool for us in terms of embracing a culture of content. It's one of the big reasons why I offered to jump on and do this webinar for all of you, hopefully just to save everyone on this call today from making the 100 million mistakes that I feel like we've made over the past year and a half. And they've got some great templates for being able to fill that in. They actually have a downloadable template, which is you can little sort of cheat code here. We downloaded it and then just converted it into a live Google Doc, and then that allows us to work with a number of our employees. Last year we actually rolled out a full remote policy to enable a more diverse and remote workforce. And what we noticed when we went from sort of a traditional office culture to a remote culture is a lot of collaboration challenges started to exist. We started dealing with people interacting with employees in different time zones, on different work schedules, and we found that using a online interactive tool like a Google Docs or CoSchedule was really helpful. Last but not least is Percolate, which I think is an amazing tool for really diving into content planning and execution. There's just so much you can do with that tool. But like anything else, tools are a bit of a dime a dozen these days. If you Google any keyword, there's 100 tools out there you can use. Really what I think it comes down to is the behaviors, right? It comes down to that behavior of understanding measurement. And I can't remember, it was some famous management consultant, it was probably Peter Drucker or someone like that that said, what gets measured gets improved. And essentially, what I like to think about, there's a gentleman by the name of Jay Baer, who's a colleague and just amazing. He runs a company called Convince and Convert, which I featured here on the bottom right of the slide. He came up with these sort of 4 ways of measuring content marketing. Consumption metrics, so how are people consuming your content? I think, again, definitely not going to talk about digital media and analytics, but of course, if you're publishing any content, no matter if you're publishing it to Medium or your own blog or your HubSpot blog, really making sure that you have reporting through Google Analytics or other tools. How are people consuming your content? That's a very, very important thing. Can dive into that in a number of ways. Hopefully some questions will come about on that. Lead generation metrics, so how are you generating leads? Of course, if you're using the HubSpot landing page builder or any tools in a marketing automation suite or a marketing cloud like Adobe or Oracle or IBM, all of these have really robust reporting tools that you should take advantage of. And then sharing metrics, who and how is sharing your content and how you can see that. And then last but not least is ultimately how does that funnel down to actual sales? And that's, I can give an entire webinar on CRM and demand generation, because we do a lot of that for our customers, but I think that that's, again, a little ambitious today. So I want to take a step back. I know we've got about 12 more minutes before we have to wrap. What I'd love to do is dive into any questions. It's been my pleasure to speak with all you guys today. Really, really appreciate you being as tuned in as you can. And for those that jumped in the live chat and participated, thank you very, very much for that. I'm going to pause now, say thank you, and answer any questions that might come up.
Awesome. Thanks, Pete. Sorry, let's get a little playback of my voice. Okay, I think we're good now. So, sorry about that. Thanks again, Pete, for joining us today. This has been an awesome webinar. I love this audience interaction. That was great. So thank you. It's on the partner marketing team here at HubSpot. So I just wanted to jump in and throw some questions your way if I see any come in the live chat. So one question that we have is, if my organization doesn't already incorporate principles of design thinking or agile ways of working, where can I start?
That's a great question. And thank you again for getting that out there, Hannah. So what I would say is, if you're not already doing design thinking, one of the first places I would suggest starting is doing a small design thinking workshop. So I do not want this to be an opportunity for a self-plug. So what I would say is if you Google sort of the basics of design thinking, there's a couple of presentations on design thinking on the Digital Surgeon SlideShare that you can take a look at. I would say if you don't already have a culture of design thinking, the first place to start is just start by having one different type of meeting. One meeting where instead of it being sort of people around a table just talking, people are getting out of their chairs and they're collaborating together. There's a number of free exercises that you can download online for design thinking if you're a little bit smaller and a little bit more scrappy. If you're with a larger organization and they're not akin to design thinking, I would definitely recommend going out and hiring a design thinking company or design thinking practitioner to come in and train some of the basics and principles. We do a lot of sort of design thinking incorporation, and how that started with us is that clients just loved the way we were working. They loved sort of seeing behind the curtain in terms of how we worked, and a couple of them ended up just asking us to come teach them how to do it. So now that's something we've been offering to our customers. So if you don't already have a culture of design thinking, I think the best place to start is just have one person who believes in how a different way of collaborating and ways of working can help. And then I think starting with just one meeting or one lunch where you can collaborate and ideate as a team, that's a great place to start. And then obviously the internet is just, full of different exercises and full of things if you Google anything in and around design thinking for your organization. So hopefully that answers the question.
Awesome, thank you. Someone else sent in, this is more of a general question. They're interested to know more about applying sprints to creation, production, and promotion, and other things to do with content. If you could talk about that.
Awesome. Leanne, thank you so much for sending that question in. So I mentioned Google Ventures, and they have a really interesting 5-day sprint approach that they talk about, but it's more so focused around user experience design or product design. What I would say is the question I would sort of ask to Leanne as I answer it and sort of try to catch up with the delay that comes here is, Leanne, are you already working in terms of Agile as a project planning and methodology in terms of how you guys plan and execute work right now? If you are, it's much easier to be able to break things down into the different stages. So one of the big things that we did in the past, which worked out really well for us, is we did a Kanban board where we used Trello to basically create different columns, and each column was the stage that content was at. So content planning, ideas generated, approved ideas, and then what stage the project was in. So from the left, basically moving from each stage. So Kanban actually stands for like visual card, and it came from, it was made famous primarily by Toyota, who was amazing at mass producing things at an extremely high quality. And what we've done is sort of, for our content planning, what we'll do is we have different stages of each content. And then as it's moving through the quote unquote production line, we're able to plan, prioritize, schedule, and execute that content. So if you're not using Agile now, Leanne, I would definitely recommend looking into Agile. We've done some interesting ways of planning and provisioning Agile sprints for how we go about doing that. And one of the first things we do is we actually work in 2-week sprints here at Digital Surgeons. And when we're doing any content planning, we have a day what's called cycle planning, where basically we look at what is all the resources of the agency, what is the capacity and the demand we have on our services, and then we plan and provision the work that we're able to execute against that. So that's a really good way to do that. There's a lot of things you can find online about Agile ways of working, but essentially just to really sort of tie it back to the crux of today's presentation, what we're really doing is we're taking the best of startup marketing and Agile and design thinking and collaboration, and we're sort of fusing those together. And what that really allows us to do is to move fast, iterate, collaborate together, but most importantly, putting the focus not on ourselves or our opinions, but putting the focus on who is the people that we are creating content for. I think that shift overall is how your organization can go from much more traditional ways of thinking, doing, and being to much more progressive, collaborative ways. And what that also does too is it helps to get rid of sort of the stakeholder bias. So in some cases, you might have a person who's more senior or is your boss, and they think that their idea matters. So I call it the sort of hippo in the room, which is the highest paid person's opinion. And one of the ways that we have helped to combat that when we're working with large companies with different departments and different opinions is really by flattening out the room a little bit and taking this approach. And just everything from body language to ways of working to little fun exercises like you can find in that game storming book. All those different things I think will help folks like Leanne with moving into more agile design thinking ways of working, and help folks like the question that Hannah had asked around how they can incorporate those into their workflow.
Sweet, thanks, Pete. Another question people seem to be really interested in, kind of related to what we were just talking about. Someone said they're interested to hear how you address the breakdown of Agile when clients drag their feet for review or approval and the sprint can't end.
It's a great question, Ryan. Thank you so much for submitting that. One of the things that I would say is I think it's being very, very transparent. So Ryan, not knowing about your pricing models or about the specific situations, what I would say is if you're on an hourly pricing model, obviously it's very easy to explain to your client how the addition in hours is resulting in additional costs for both you and them. So I think transparency is important. If you're on a fixed schedule, so for example, if you're using the Agile points model as opposed to sort of an hourly type of breakdown, if it's more value-based, one of the things I think really comes down to is being very clear up front in the project planning process as to where the client needs to be involved or wants to be involved. Because I say need and want in sort of italic font here, because it's some cases where they need to be involved is not where they want to be involved, and vice versa. Typically when clients drag their feet when it comes to a review or approval, what we like to do is really dig into what's causing the slowdowns in the organization. And a lot of times what it comes down to is, maybe it's a matrix organization or it's the way they're organized. Maybe it's legal compliance. So a lot of our clients have very large legal departments. So I think it's understanding the different points of friction in that process, and that by being able to include those people that have the friction, you can move things faster. So for example, in the case of that legal I mentioned, we actually got compliance involved early, and we found that just simply by getting them involved in some of the ideation workshops, while they weren't contributing as many ideas, they actually helped us get things through approval pretty fast. Because ultimately, I think inclusion and just having people be more involved makes a huge difference for how we work. And business isn't that different from how we operate as humans. So hopefully that answers your question, Ryan.
Awesome, thanks, Pete. So it looks like that is all that has come in through our live chat, and we are pretty much at the top of the hour anyway. So if anyone has any last minute questions, anything you think of afterwards, Pete's handle's right there. I'm sure he would be more than happy to connect with you once our webinar is over. So I just want to say thank you once again to Pete for joining us. This has been great, and I hope everybody learned something new today.
Thanks so much, Hannah, and thank you everyone for tuning in. Please, like I said, shoot me a tweet anytime. I'd love to connect with you guys, and it's been my pleasure. Shoot me a note, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. And most importantly, if there's anything I can do better for next time to make this more valuable for you guys, I consider feedback to be the greatest gift. So please share along.
Awesome. Thanks, Pete.
Thanks, guys.